Joining us today are Kristy, Leigh, Lussier, and Lauren from Unraveling the Pattern. And we're going to do a crap analysis of episode 1. Want to find out what that is? Stick around. Hi, I'm MALKIER'S King. You can call me Matt. And welcome to What Were They Thinking? A show in partnership with Dragonmount, in which I and a few guests will do my trademarked crap analysis of an episode of The Wheel of Time. What is a crap analysis? I'm glad you asked. It's an acronym, and it stands for C, compare and contrast the show to the books. R, reverse engineer the decision-making process. Try to figure out what the reasons could be that the production had behind making the decisions to add, subtract, or alter the storyline from the books. A, anticipate the ripple effect that these changes and additions or subtractions will have throughout the series. And P is to predict the direction the show is going to take based on our previous discussion. Now, joining me today are really two people who need no introduction in the Wheel of Time fandom. Please welcome Kristy Leigh Lussier, screenwriter, script doctor, story analyst for WeFixYourScript.com, podcaster for the successful Screenwriters Podcast, and one half of Team Moraine for the Wheel of Time world. And the man, the myth, the legend, Lauren from Unraveling the Pattern. Kristy, thank you for joining me.
Well, you're absolutely welcome.
And Lauren, thank you for joining me.
Yeah, pleasure to be here. Excited to talk about the Wheel of Time with you.
All episodes of this show are complete book and show spoilers, from New Spring all the way to Memory of Light. If you have not read all of the books and you do not want spoilers, you should not watch this episode until you're finished with the series. So the purpose of this show is for us to do what I call a crap analysis. I was very proud of myself when I came up with that. We're going to compare and contrast the show to the books.
Okay.
We're going to reverse engineer the decision-making process, basically try to go back and think what was the reason for why they chose to put what they did on the screen, or why they chose to cut or adapt or whatever. The A is to anticipate the ripple effects. Changes and alterations or additions will have a ripple effect down throughout the course of the books.
That's what's interesting about Sarah's job, is that was part of Sarah's roles and responsibilities, was to be able to be a resource for that. So if they were looking at a story change or a shift in something, she was kind of a resource to say, what are we preparing for? What are we looking at? If we make this choice, what is A, B, C, and D going to happen down the road? And for her to have the knowledge to say, if you do this, this could happen, or that could happen, or this is going to happen now, like that was part of her job as well. Right.
Yeah. And then P is finally based on the episode, to predict where we think the show is going to go from those plot lines within the show.
Episode 1 perspective, they had so much to do. They had to introduce so much to a new audience. And, I've been listening to a lot of different podcasts, watching a lot of different YouTubers. And one of the things that I forget as a book reader who's super into the details of the books is that they are not writing this show for me, right? They're writing this show. I mean, sure, I'm part of that audience they're writing it for, but they're writing it for a much wider audience. And as someone mentioned, they're writing it for my mom who's doing her crossword puzzle while she watches. They're writing it for people who casually view TV and are like, oh, I heard this thing's on Amazon, I should check this out. And so what a daunting and incredible task that must be, to take everything that is the Wheel of Time, which is this massive book series, and try to condense it down into these bite-sized chunks for an audience of people who may not even like fantasy, let alone, in-depth TV shows like this. And episode 1 had so many things to juggle. You know, people were like, why isn't Tom in the first episode, as an example of changes, right? Changes between the first episode and the books, because they already introduced like 7 main characters in the first episode. Like any more than that, you can't do that in a pilot. You're going to lose people. And I'm sure, Kristy, you know this better than anyone as a script writer. Like, how many new characters can you introduce in a single episode of TV before you lose people?
Oh, I mean, well, even in like you mentioned, in a pilot, you really want to be able to focus on that core group that's going to drive the narrative or that drives the story. So for this pilot episode, clearly, obviously, we are introduced to Egwene and Rand, and I mean, the Two Rivers people, because that's who we're following. This is the journey that we're going on with them. Right. And, you know, the interesting choice that is presented in the pilot episode is making this more of kind of an ensemble journey versus where we know in the first book, it's basically Rand's point of view. And so that was kind of a little bit of a choice to say, you know, we know we've got more characters that we're going to follow on this arc. So we have to make this decision in terms of introducing them, giving them their starting point, and then we're taking the audience with them through. So for this pilot, I think they did a great job of, for sure, establishing clearly, obviously, within the first minute to 2, we obviously see Leandrin in the cold open, but we see Moraine and Lan. So we should be seeing our main characters in those scenes as they start when you're in the pilot. You know, could we have seen Tom? Sure. I know we got maybe 45 seconds to a minute of Pad and Fane, that kind of thing. But ultimately, at the end of the day, that pilot episode is about the Two Rivers people that we're about to follow. So I think that choice to do that, if you're going to make the decision that we're going to do an ensemble point of view, it worked.
It never occurred to me to the fact that they introduced this as an ensemble journey when we have 2 POVs in the first book. Mm-hmm. We have Rand and Perrin, and that's it. And everybody else is seen through the eyes of Rand and Perrin.
Sure.
So that didn't even occur to me. And now that you're mentioning that just makes so much sense. So let me ask you, I'll ask Kristy, and then I'd like your thoughts on this, Lauren. Given that we want to focus on the main ensemble in the pilot, and we want to try to keep everybody else aside while we're establishing the characters, why do you think they chose to put Leandrin in that cold open? I originally thought that it was because they wanted to show what a false dragon had to look forward to when they get gentled, but they showed that very well with Logain. Sure. So I don't necessarily know that specifically added something, unless there was something to add at that moment. What do you think about that?
I thought it was actually really interesting that they went with that cold open, because it builds, it shows that there's tension, and it shows that there is a conflicted world that we're walking into, where clearly we're going to meet people who are walking through this conflict of the established world that we're about to be introduced to. And so that cold open already introduces the element of there's a divide between men and women, because it's women chasing this male down. So it gives you that bit of information. It also clearly shows that there's something that women feel like is either bad about the men, or the audience thinks, okay, there's this kind of magic system, and it's bad for some people and good for others, or what's the conflict about the magic system? So I feel like the decision to do that cold open was, how do we put some tension and start with a bang, like some tension right at the beginning, introduce like a conflict, and then like really interesting direction wise is that they pull back, and then we see Moraine and Lan looking down on them to give you scope. And clearly we know these people are on kind of a different mission than what's going on down there, but this is what they're dealing with. Like they're looking down on, here's the kind of story that we're going to follow with these 2 people having an objective that has to do with what we just saw down below, but we're not getting the full fleshed out story yet. So it's just introducing these bits of kind of tension, interesting introduction to the magic system.
one thing we're forgetting is there's actually 2 cold opens for that pilot, because the very first cold open is Moraine in the tower.
Oh, okay.
Grabbing
Yes.
this sangreal and giving her little spiel like, hey, men did this bad thing all this time ago, where they tried to cage darkness, the arrogance, and I've got to find the man who is meant to save or break the world. And to me, that cold open was, personally, I was just like, okay, they got to establish this for a new audience. I understand this. To me, it was kind of a little bit, I rolled my eyes a little bit, because I was like, oh, exposition.
Very
like,
Lord
right
of the
at this,
Ringsy kind of, Mm-hmm.
But then probably the entirety of the remainder of the first season, I felt that there wasn't enough exposition, personally. And again, this is coming from someone who cannot be objective about the TV show, because I am so into the details of the books. And so there were so many opportunities where I'm like, why didn't Loyal take 1 minute to just explain what's going on here? Or, why didn't
it's Loyal,
Moraine,
it takes 10 minutes.
Yeah, all right. Why didn't Moraine say something to clarify this one little question or whatever?
Sure.
But that being said, I'm not a screenwriter. I don't think that way. I just am like, people need to understand what's going on. And, my content that I make on my channel is all about trying to explain these details to people.
Right.
Trying to be like, oh, there are 2 halves of the one power, and there's the male half and the female half, and the male half was tainted, blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm trying to explain this to people. So for me, that intro sequence after the Moraine bit, when we do cut to the Leandrin scene and all of that, I actually really liked that and was surprised that I would like it, because it was so out of like left field for me. It's not in the books at all. I mean, Leandrin or any other Aes Sedai, really, maybe Elida a little bit. There aren't really other Aes Sedai in the first book. And so
right.
They were introducing very quickly this, oh, there are like women with power, and there's this weird dynamic between men and women. I found that to be really interesting, but also, a little bit confusing. People who didn't read the books were like, so Leandrin said that men make the one power evil or something, and there was some confusion there. That being said, that moment when the man turns to his friend and he's not there, I really like that. That was a really great sort of surprise moment. But I want to say one other thing about this. It's hard to view this show one episode at a time without some sort of judgment. You have to kind of back off and look at it as a whole, because there's a great symmetry to the first season. That cold open scene ends with those Age of Legends buildings all covered over with they've been covered by life, trees, time, right? And then the end of the cold open of the finale shows that exact same landscape, but 3,000 years earlier, when it was all teeming with people and hovercrafts and all kinds of things,
right?
And so there's a visual symmetry there that I actually quite like after you look at the whole season. Lews Therin and Latra in that finale, Lews Therin's wearing black, Latra's wearing white. We see the man, the dark one at the end, wearing black and white.
Yep.
Which I thought was really cool. And then in that opening scene, you see this huge division between men and women. And to me, that is meant to be a setup that doesn't really get payoff unless you're paying attention in that finale cold open. And so as a whole, it was better to me, in hindsight, watching the whole thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. I think it's visual foreshadowing. I think it was a conscious choice on the direction. Even, I mean, writing wise, yes, but that's even visually directing, like, and the showrunner wanting to say, like, I want to make sure we're establishing every time that we're foreshadowing towards things to come, or setting up the symbolism. And you're right. That's a great way to put it, is that there's some pretty good symmetry with those elements in the first season. I'm glad that you brought that up.
Yeah, it's interesting that you brought up a few points that I found very, very analogous to the books. You mentioned that you kept asking, you wanted more exposition, and you kept saying, why didn't Moraine just take a minute and say this? And that's like literally the entire first 5 books. We just kept saying, Moraine, why aren't you just telling them? And she never does. And that's who Moraine is. She just never tells people anything.
It was character. It was character building. Yeah.
We have to know. We know that in the books, she was expecting Rand to be Taviran. Because she mentioned when they were in Camelin, she mentioned, I was expecting one Taviran, and instead I found three.
Right.
Obviously a change that she is now expecting these Taviran. Where do you think this whole rumor came from? You know, Taviran is not a well-known phenomenon.
Yeah.
Well, and that's exactly why it bothered me as a book reader, because I'm like, okay, first of all, Taviran are so rare. Maybe you have like one in every 1,000 years or something, or every 200 or 300 years. And when you do, they are major shifters of history, people like Arthur Hawkwing, right? So I was like, to say like rumor says there's like just the thought of some random people in the middle of nowhere in the Two Rivers being like, it feels like the pattern's really moving around 4 specific people in this area. The only way that I can kind of excuse that is that Min told her. That's how I like to think of it. Min told her there were Taviran in that area, and Min is one of her eyes and ears. Even that doesn't really sit well with me, but at least, someone who actually can read the pattern and knows could have that inside info.
That would make a lot of sense.
Yeah. And also, if you're going to introduce, like you said, if you're going to introduce a significance with a specific word or, presence that we're saying, like rumors of this is happening, that needs follow through and payoff as well.
Yeah.
Which I don't necessarily feel that we got through the rest of the season, was an explanation as to what Taviran even is and why.
Right.
And why it's significant that there's so many at one time. That was never really fleshed out, I don't think. So, that again was an interesting choice to do at the pretty much beginning of this pilot episode, but that really needed to kind of be fleshed out and paid and have a payoff.
I feel like it might pay off in the second season, because you notice in the books, in the first book, Robert Jordan had a certain idea of Taviran, and then as the books went on, the essence of Taviran really shifted, because at first it was more, these are people who the pattern moves everything around. And then as the books went on, it really became more of these are people who influence chance. And they still talked about how the pattern will pull something in if you need them, but that wasn't really the main emphasis of Taviran. Whenever their Taviran nature was called into play throughout the books, it tended to be much more in the line of influencing chance, making something that had a 1 in 1,000 chance happen, that sort of thing.
Yeah,
So,
that's a really good point. I can see that really hopefully coming to the forefront and playing through in season 2. And there's opportunity to do that.
I also think that one of the things I love about the first episode and the first season is that they introduce some of the bigger themes that aren't really solid until the end, the final book.
Oh yeah, interesting.
I love how they introduce things like free will and the idea of the pattern, and things like rebirth and why we do the things we do. It's not just for our future children, it's for our literal future selves, because we have to live in this world in the future.
Sure.
Yeah. I love that theme, and that's not really strong in the books until the end. That
conversation between Tam and Rand, where Tam was telling Rand, answering Rand's question about the Wheel of Time, that was like pure veins of gold moment right there. And I can see that coming to play in season 7.
Yeah.
Literally, we could hear Tam's voice repeating those words to Rand as he has his epiphany. Like, I really like that setup. But the other thing I like about that conversation is how much it sets up Logain and this idea that no one knows their past lives. And then we have Logain show up and he's like, I know my past lives. I'm the dragon. So what Tam said wasn't true. I keep getting tangential here, but this is another thing I love about Robert Jordan and the first season is this unreliable narrator. And you have this unreliable narrator all the time in the books, where people who think they know best actually don't know what's really going on. And I think they played with that very well, even with things like Leandrin being introduced right at the start and saying, you men make it filthy. Well, yeah, from her point of view, but she's seeing it wrong. She doesn't understand the history.
They added the Egwene's Women's Circle initiation, which I found it was very interesting. The only thing that I had to say about that was that it it highlights this difference between Nynaeve and Egwene, in that Egwene is very, very quick to undo her braid. And Nynaeve is very, very insistent on keeping her braid in throughout the entire series until it burns off and it's too short for her to wear in a braid anymore. But Nynaeve, when she's talking to Egwene as Meryn braids Egwene's hair, and she tells her that this braid is symbolic, that all women are always alone and never alone, and this braid symbolizes that we went before you and we're with you, and we're here in the darkness. This will show you the light. Like, to me, that explains why it is so important to Nynaeve to keep that braid, because of that symbolism.
Agreed. I also love that throughout the series, whenever Nynaeve is faced with doubts about herself in the books, and you mentioned that there are only two point of views in the first book, but you do get a few Nynaeve points of view as well in book one. There's only like one or two, but they're short. But Nynaeve, what she says is not what she thinks, and what she thinks isn't really what she thinks. She manages to almost like ghost herself about things.
Yeah.
She's really good at that in the books, and she's brilliantly written, in my opinion, by Robert Jordan. But in the show, you can't have that internal monologue. And there are several moments, including in the finale, where Nynaeve intentionally pulls her braid over and grips it. She's not tugging it like over the top comic book Nynaeve in the books. Like, she's not like, yeah, I'm angry, but she has these moments where she clings to it, because I think she absolutely believes what she tells Egwene at the start, that this braid will bring you comfort. It will help you remember that you are not alone. I love that version of Nynaeve that they're giving us in the first episode. When everyone is putting their lanterns out during bell time, and she's all alone, and she puts her lantern out, and she has this moment to cry when no one's looking in the pilot. That was my favorite moment of the pilot, because it was such a tender Nynaeve moment, and she immediately like wiped her tears off and went to bell time, and then watched people dance while standing on the side. To me, that was better character development with no words than just about anything I've seen in a show. And so that the braid, to me, is even better in the show because of what it means to Nynaeve. She's reminding herself, you're not alone. You're not alone. I love that.
Yeah. I mean, that's really cool that you have that observation. That is really neat. I mean, I do remember seeing those kind of couple moments where she grabs it, and of course we're all anticipating like this big tug of the braid.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. Like it likens back to that first kind of opening, monologue for her. And yeah, she really is holding on to that. But there's also a sense too, I think, that it also symbolizes her kind of mentor, the people that brought her, like made her who she is. And so when she does have that really just wonderful moment, I mean, it's sad, but where she's kind of alone and she tears up a little bit, to me, that was like her honoring her past, her mentor. It's that kind of in writing, the mentor mentee relationship that we see in a lot of certain genres. And that's kind of what it meant for me. So that now she's like, okay, I'm moving forward now. And then she goes to the village and knows where her place is, and she feels like she knows where her place is. So that's kind of what I saw for it.
And I do like that too. And, because she has that conversation with Moraine, I think earlier that day, right?
Yeah.
Where she tells about her mentor and how she went to the tower and was rejected.
Right.
And she has this narrative that she's built up, whether or not it's true. And I did, especially just watching the pilot, I absolutely thought, oh, she's thinking about her mentor who she lost.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But later, as the episodes progress, you learn that, she lost her family. She knew her family.
Yeah.
Yeah. She wasn't just a little baby. The reason she has such a connection with Lan is because he also lost his family, and there's a lot of, I think that there's layers to that, which I really enjoy. And just like the books, watching the season on repeat or like rewatching it, there's a lot of little layers like that you don't notice when you're just watching the pilot or just watching, one episode.
Yeah, so, for sure.
I think that was really well done.
The introduction to Lan and Moraine, that is vastly different.
Definitely probably a sense of like, let's have a more dramatic entrance per se, or, palpable plot point moment where we're introducing these two characters we've already seen, the audience has already seen. But obviously the characters on screen in Emond's Field haven't yet. So they wanted this kind of more dramatic moment per se for them to be introduced and kind of come into the village. My guess is that's kind of the choice that they went with. But, I correct me if I'm wrong, but I do remember that even though Matt says, hey, there's the lady and the guy in the town already, like by the time Rand first sees her and Lan, it's like very dramatic as well. And the way he kind of just describes her, the way that she's present, and the way that like Lan doesn't say anything. He doesn't introduce her. He doesn't like walk in first. She always walks into a room first, which is weird that they went in a different direction with it. So I think maybe it was just for dramatic effect to kind of make that change for an audience. A general audience isn't gonna, they might hear Matt mention there's these people in town, but it's not going to have as big of a punch if you don't have just a big kind of thing.
So, one of the things I like about the book is Rand has just seen the fade on the road. He's scared. He's skittish. Then he finds out like his friend also saw it. And then he hears about strangers
in town.
And he's nervous. And there's this moment where he's like, is that the black cloaked rider that I saw? Yep. And then when he does see Moraine, as you mentioned in the book, he's like, oh, wow, she's so pretty. And he has like a younger person's perspective than obviously in the show. But then he sees Lan almost like as a surprise, because Lan was basically blending in. Right. He didn't even notice him until she walks away and he follows her.
Yep.
And I love that. I think
I love it too.
More of an interesting introduction. But again, they had to speed so much up. And the show wasn't about these young men being scared of seeing a black cloaked rider. It was about them being young adults, having young adult problems with relationships and being worried about whatever was going on in their small little farm lives.
Yeah.
And so it was a completely different shift, from books, I feel.
I actually have to say, I think I'm actually quite happy that they didn't focus on that. And this is, thinking about reverse engineering some of the decision making.
Sure.
This could very well be part of it. If you focus on the black cloaked horseman, it's very, very heavily Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
And I think they wanted to stay away from that as much as they could.
I have to kind of maybe just play, like a devil's advocate a little bit, is that an open road is one of my favorite scenes in Eye of the World. Sorry, there's my cat.
Hey.
One of them. It's one of my favorite scenes. And I know that there was this, again, kind of conscious decision in the writing and structure process that they really wanted to introduce kind of Egwene's story arc first. And she's like the first one that we see. And it's one decision that I just don't agree with. I still feel, and I'm going to hold to it, that we should have started with an open road. Yeah. That should have been our first introduction to Emond's Field, no matter what. I think it would have still given the same sense, because we just did see the sequence with Liandrin and Moraine. So we do know that there's powerful women in the world. But to see Rand's introduction in that sequence, that also adds to the tension building. That also adds to, we just saw something kind of scary in this first opening. And now there's something here that this kid's already on edge, and he kind of notices, but then he just kind of, goes on about his world. And then we meet his friends and all that kind of stuff. To me, it's one of the best intros in a fantasy book. And I just love that sequence. And I'm just wondering why they didn't really put more emphasis on it.
Yeah, you talk about reverse engineering. I actually think you're absolutely right that it does seem like they made some very conscious decisions to try not to be Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones. Right?
Sure.
But also, I think, again, they were trying to hide the true identity of the dragon. And by having Rand be that first scene, to me, the one thing they should have done, like I didn't mind the empty road scene that we did get. It was simple. It was more about
Oh, it's
Rand.
empty road, isn't it? Oh my God.
Yeah, well, empty road, open road, same thing.
I'm tired. Sorry, guys. I kept saying open road. Like, what's wrong with what am I saying?
Well, I was just going to say, though, I like, though, that there was this little back and forth between Tam and Rand. And one thing they did establish very well in the pilot was that Rand has a great father.
Yes.
Right? Tam
yes.
was a great father.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad they did that. And that made that little payoff later with the reveal.
Oh, for sure.
That much better for me.
Yeah.
However, there's one scene I wish they had added back into the pilot. And that was, you didn't need to hear what Tam was saying in the Westwood or wherever they are when he's feverish, but just seeing Rand carrying him, struggling through the forest as a small cutscene during the whole Winter Night attack.
Yeah.
And then maybe him hearing his dad mumble something, laying him down and having his dad hand him the Heron blade.
Yeah.
To me, that little scene would have been so much better for the payoff later. And I'm sad that they didn't include that. But
they didn't show you that until was episode 8?
Episode 7.
It was 7. Yeah.
Yes.
When you have the reveal.
Episode 7. And honestly, I think probably the reason why they didn't do it was pacing. Because if you have all of that fast-paced action of a fight scene in Winter Night, and then all of a sudden jump over to this really, really quiet moment, would have been very, very jarring.
Maybe, but sometimes when you have these high intense moments with all this action, it's nice to have a little moment of peace. I don't know. I can't structure stories.
Doesn't he feel like he's in running from the Trollocs? Like Rand can still hear the Trollocs, or feels like they're coming up on him. So there's more of an urgency and desperation.
True. You could still see them. Yeah, you could see them off in the distance or something. Yeah.
So my guess is, to your point earlier, is again, they didn't want so much of a close reference to Lord of the Rings. And so they were probably thinking this is maybe too close to when, the hobbits are being chased by the ring wraiths, that kind of thing. And they didn't want that didn't want that comparison.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you remember that. I think it was in a Q&A. At some point, Rafe mentioned, he was talking about Sarah's job, and he mentioned that he had considered making Perrin a bear brother instead of a brother.
I'm so glad that's been revealed.
Yeah, I think it was brought up in the writer's room. I don't think that it was Rafe's idea. I think people were throwing ideas at the wall.
It was Amazon. I think it was Amazon.
I think because I think, if I remember correctly, the idea was that the wolf trope feels very overused in fantasy,
and it was Game of Thrones. It was too close to Game of Thrones now. Yeah,
they wanted something just different,
right?
And then Sarah threw the literal book at them, and
it was one of the things she really fought very hard for. Like at some point, Sarah can understand, and if it's given in a great explanation and it's explained why. Her job is to say, okay, well, then this is what I need to work with, and here's how I can help move forward. But that was one of the things that she was like, absolutely not.
Right.
Like, no.
Well, yeah. Speaking of ripple effects,
right.
A debt of gratitude.
Yeah.
I think another reason they didn't have that detailed scene with Tam and Rand is because, again, they didn't want people too early to suspect that Rand was the dragon. Sure. I think, if anything, they were really trying to keep the eyes away from him at the start. I think that's why some people thought he was, is because there was so little revealed about him compared to the other characters. Okay. Because Perrin had his wife and he had the wolves, and Matt had the dagger and was clearly getting sick. And then there was that whole thing where Tom thought he was channeling. Like, it's almost like they were intentionally trying to pull your eyes away from Rand. And I think that's why some people were like, it's probably him.
Okay. Yeah, but I can see how a viewer would see that for sure.
So now that you mentioned Perrin and his wife, let's talk about, instead of talking about how we feel about it, because we all know how we feel about it, what are some of the reasons you think that might have guided that decision, and how you think that will play off in going forward in the series? I
honestly do feel like it was just to really kind of age them up. I really feel like it was to move their character development forward. They're not still kind of in their teenage youth. They are into early adulthood. So in early adulthood, you would be dealing with some friends who were already married and have a wife and are in a different place in life. And I think that was the choice to really put kind of Perrin into that position and kind of swap out the whole Master Luhan blacksmith thing. So yeah, I honestly feel like that was probably just the driving decision to make that story choice.
You think we will see Master Luhan and Elspeth Luhan later on in the series, like when Perrin comes back to the Two Rivers, or do you think that with 2,700 named characters, those two got the axe?
I mean, look, they don't have a blacksmith anymore. They need a blacksmith. Someone's got to take over. Right?
Yeah.
Just like they need another wisdom.
They need another wisdom.
My thinking is, if we get the whole back to the Two Rivers plot line.
Days Conger took over for Nynaeve.
Yeah, in the books, yeah.
In the books.
And she was introduced. That's true.
She was. Mm-hmm.
In the show, despite how I feel about the whole Leigh Ibarra thing, I think it was actually a smart way to introduce characters, or Perrin's character. In the books, Perrin is introduced as this not really slow of thought, but deliberate and careful thinker who thinks things through before he makes rash decisions. And he knows he's kind of a big guy and is worried about hurting people. And it's not really ever explained why he's that way. He just is. Maybe it's just because he's big and he's a little clumsy. I don't know. But by giving him a wife that this terrible tragedy happens to, we can talk about fridging and all of that and whether or not that was a good idea in the show. But to me, this, one of the details is she was using a hammer in the forge.
Yeah.
When they were fighting the Trollocs, and he was using an axe.
Yeah.
And he killed her with the axe. And so now Perrin has a reason to be concerned about how he can let his inner beast or rage or whatever you want to call it out, and how he could harm people. He has a reason to be attracted to the Way of the Leaf. He has a reason to want to pick the hammer, which is a tool for making things, over the axe, which is basically just a tool for killing. He has a reason for all these things that, in my opinion, that's a better setup than what the books do for him having those reasons, except for the fact that they kill off a character that's a female just to give him that backstory. That's the unfortunate side of that. It could have just as well been Mistress Luhan or Master Luhan.
Or Master Luhan. Why not? Establish again that mentor-mentee relationship. He was obviously significant to Perrin. We know that from the books. And so, why not just do that? Why go a different direction?
But it does seem, there's a table when they're in the inn when Moraine and Lan do appear, and Perrin is sitting at the big boy table with Tam and some other older men. He is in the village council, in my opinion. I mean, it's never explained, but in the show, I'm pretty sure he is the blacksmith, right? He's he's not an apprentice. And so I think they were trying to establish, like you already said, they were trying to adult him up. Yeah, adult him up.
I think the reason why they wouldn't, in that circumstance, they wouldn't use Master Luhan is because in the pilot, that's another character you have to introduce and explain the relationship between him and Perrin.
But they did the same thing with his wife. Yeah, they did the same thing with his wife.
If they're already introducing his wife as a way of aging him up, to then have to introduce yet another character and explain their relationship, like the relationship between a husband and a wife is intuitive. Like we don't need anything else. We know relationship just by knowing the name of it.
Yeah, I mean, you have a point for sure.
Having to demonstrate the relationship between Perrin and Master Luhan would have taken a lot more screen time.
Yeah, you do have a good point for sure.
So there were a couple of small changes that I noticed that were not, again, very small, very minor in terms of the overall impact, but they did have effects later on in the series. And the two that struck out to me most were that, Matt's sisters were much, much younger.
Yeah.
Like they seemed under 10.
Yeah.
Which means that they're highly unlikely to be going to the White Tower in a couple of years. Which is what happens later on in the books. Now, does that have any real impact on the series? Not really. But it's just one of these minor details that later on when Alana bonds Rand's not going to scare the crap out of Bode.
Interesting. But
Yeah.
it could be other random women from the Two Rivers that are there with
For sure.
Alana and Varen, you know.
And the other thing which really struck me when it happened is that Tam lit his lantern with a match.
I
Yeah.
saw that.
And
I
that
saw
means that means that Aludra doesn't invent matches, which again, not a major plot point.
Right.
You know, Aludra inventing matches, I feel, is meant to show her ingenuity,
Sure.
and her inventive spirit. But whether that means that they're not going to have her create cannons later on,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But
And it's quite possible that it just was never, that wasn't something that could even be kind of caught beforehand. I'm pretty sure probably what happened is it just says in the script, Tam lights the fire, and then on set, they just are like, okay, how does he light the fire? Oh, put some matches out there. And then later on, Sarah sees the cut and Sarah's like, there's matches. Oh, well, I can't fix that now. Like, that's probably kind of the things that happen that, you know, you don't, unless it's in the script and can be caught ahead of time or questioned ahead of time or even asked ahead of time.
Right.
Did anybody think to would they have even had matches? You know, like that kind of thing.
That is interesting.
It looked like a very nice looking matchbox.
It did.
You know, I actually take it a little bit differently, and I feel like somebody said something about it at some point. I don't remember if it was Sarah.
Somebody caught it. Yeah.
I mean, I remember we latched onto that pretty quick, but I think Sarah or somebody did say something that even that was discussed. I think
it's possible,
like it was an intentional choice again.
Yeah.
I could be wrong. I might be misremembering, but
it's possible. She probably could have said, you know, in the grand scheme of things, as we move forward down the road, it could be something else that,
or if,
you know,
if you do introduce Aludra, she could just say, oh yeah, I invented those. You know, peddlers and merchants sell them around the country or whatever. Like, I don't know, like that's not necessarily
this is kind of one of those smaller things that us book readers catch, right? But you know,
but to the Matt's sister's point, you know, Swan was like 9 when she left.
She was like 10, right? 9, 10.
She was pretty little. Maybe she was 11, but still, she was young. And when she left, and I think the actress who played her was 9 or 10 when she was cast.
Yeah.
So it's possible that, you know, young Padawans are just younger. The younglings.
Although I will say I like that choice again to make a little bit of that change. That gave an interesting arc and some depth to Matt that we don't get to see until further on into the books. And it was I really liked that. That was one of my favorite changes and choices that they did, was to go in a little bit of that direction with Matt. You know, his parents, you kind of have to give a reason for him to be in the predicament, in the position that he's in. So it's justified and makes sense on kind of why he's making some of the decisions that he's making. But ultimately, I felt that choice was actually really good. I liked it.
Speaking of his parents, you know, we talk about the ripple effects, how this will affect later. One of the things I like, you know, I've talked to Julia Howland quite a bit. She's so nice. She's the one who plays Matt's mother. After it kind of came out that, you know, her and Abel aren't the best people in the first episode, you know, I had a conversation with her about it, and she's hopeful that when her character returns, that there will be some redemption there. That when Perrin returns to the Two Rivers, that, you know, remember who's kidnapped? It's Natty Cawthon and the daughters, and you know who's out in the forest with Tam trying his best to get his daughters back? Abel Cawthon. And so I actually really like that setup, that it takes that winter night moment where he almost loses his family and loses his oldest son, and then them getting kidnapped by the White Cloaks. That's what turns Abel Cawthon into the cool Tam's partner that we all know. He's not like womanizing anymore in the village and being a jerk father. He's changed and he cares. I actually really look forward to that. I hope that that's what the payoff is.
Yeah, that's really cool. I do like that.
Are there any other changes or additions in the first episode that really stuck out to you?
I don't think so. I think that, you know, pacing wise and structure wise, I know there's been kind of a lot of debate and talk about should episode 1 have been a little longer. I agree. I think that pilot should have been a little longer. It's not unheard of for them to do a longer pilot. I've seen it on Amazon. We just started watching The Expanse. I think the Expanse pilot is longer than a normal episode, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe, I don't know. But I would have done the same thing in terms of, by the end of episode 1 in that pilot, we should have gone through Winter Night and they're leaving the village. And so I feel like it was on pace and on course in that regard. I know there's a feeling of like we're trying to cram a lot of stuff and get a lot of stuff in and move forward, but ultimately that would have been my thought process too, is by the end of episode 1 we're already leaving the two rivers. And so I don't feel like there was much in terms of kind of the overall aspect of change. It's a pace decision I would have made in terms of writing. So
to me, the worst part of the first season was how quickly they go from, oh, we're all here, we got to get out of here, and they just leave the two rivers. I would have liked to see some sort of Weep for Manetheren thing where the whole village is against Moraine, or some sort of like Moraine having to convince everyone and their families, no, we have to go, this is real, this is a real threat, or having some sort of better goodbyes between Tam and Rand, or Egwene and her parents, whatever. I just felt like there needed to be something a little more than just, well, we're on our horses and we're out because this lady says we got to go. I mean, it did help that there were Trollocs running down and that she's like, they're coming for you, we got to go. But still, it felt rushed.
In the books, she made them leave without telling anyone.
Right. But she didn't have to necessarily convince them, because it was easy to say, why do you think the Trollocs just went to Rand's farm and, Matt's place and whatever? So there was a reasoning behind, like, they're targeting you. So if you don't leave, there's consequences. And I agree with Lauren. That was one of my big sticking points in this pilot, was at the very end, it would have been easy enough for Rand to say, they're coming because you showed up. They weren't here before you got here.
Why don't you
get out of here?
Why should I believe a word you're saying about
them? Exactly.
That actually leads to another change that I didn't know how I felt about it. But, in this context, it makes a lot more sense. She actually said to them, one of you is the Dragon Reborn.
Yeah.
Which she didn't say, at the time when they left in the books, they didn't know that. All they knew was the Dark One wants you.
Yes.
And she knew that one of them was a Dragon Reborn, but she didn't tell them.
Yeah.
And imagine if she had told them, they would have just sat there starting and yelling at her.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Book version of those characters would have been like, are you kidding? You basically just came into my village and tell me that I'm the devil.
Yeah. Get out of here.
That's kind of what Matt did. Have you fully lost your mind?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think, and they have conversations later, they were like, you really think that one of us is the dragon? Like, none of that is the way the dragon is portrayed in the books. The dragon is right next to the Dark One in their minds. I mean, they're wrong. They don't understand. When I read the books the first time, I was only like 13 or 14. A lot of this stuff went way over my head. I did not really understand. At the very end of the first book, when Moraine says the dragon is reborn, I was like, the what? I somehow completely missed that entire like subplot when I first read it. I just was like, okay, the Dark One's after these people for some reason, and they had to leave. Like, I was totally on board with whatever was in Rand's head, and I didn't think outside of that, Yeah. And so,
wait, the dragon was reborn? Spoiler alert.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my God.
but in the show, they just chose. That is the big thing that season 1 was meant to do, is introduce that there's this important prophesied person who could be bad or good. We don't know.
Right.
And it's one of these people. Who could it be?
It was interesting. I noticed in the Battle of Winter Night, we had that scene, and they didn't need to put it in there, but they chose to put in that scene where the woman's circle surrounded one of the Trollocs and destroyed it.
Yeah.
That to me, that's very similar to what happens in the Battle of Emond's Field in was the Shadow Rising?
Shadow Rising. Yeah.
So my question to you, Kristy, as a screenwriter, do you think they're going to kind of repeat that and have that parallel, or do you think that they would not show that again, that specific aspect of it, because they've already done it?
I actually think that was purposely made. One, to obviously again set up these two rivers people and what the sense of kind of their identity and what they're willing to do for their town and their village and the blood of Manetheren. Like, it's like, that is essentially what it is. It's setting that up. So repetitiveness obviously is a clear theme. We know that. The fact that she still gets to do the Manetheren speech, even though it's in the second episode. But I do think that, yeah, if we saw it once, we're going to see it again. Like, we're going to, that will definitely come back because it's in their blood.
One last thing that I know that stuck out to me is that they ended the first episode with the intro to the books.
Yeah.
You know, the Wheel of Time Turns opening. And I thought that was a great way to end that first episode, and a great way to get that line into the show somehow. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
I would have been probably upset if we didn't get to hear that. I mean, regardless of that, if that helps build story for non-book readers, or give kind of a sense to non-book readers of, now we're about to kind of go on this journey. If anything, that was put there for us. That was put there for the book readers, because it's just synonymous with how we understand this world and this story. So I'm glad it's there. I think it's fine at the end. I like it. I would have been mad if it wasn't there, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Well, there were so many things that happened that I almost forgot about it. But then when it did happen, it was like, oh yeah, that, it was exciting. This just occurred to me. I hope that every season opening, or every first episode of each season, ends with that.
We've talked about similarities and the differences between the show and the books, and we have talked about many of the reasons why we think some of these changes were made, and we've talked about many of the ripple effects. So we've scratched everything off the list, and the last thing is, based on how we've seen these decisions being made in our minds, how do you think some of these storylines are going to progress as the series goes on?
Well, again, like the cold open or the opening with Leander, and that played out, right?
Right. How do you see that going, the direction of that? Because that clearly has an important role in the story.
Yeah. So I will say that some of the non-readers that watched it were questioning Leandrin. Yeah. Is she a good, like, is there bad Aes Sedai? Like, right. those seeds were planted, which was great. Because I do think that we're going to see more of that. I think the choice to introduce and see the White Tower in season 1, which I have a whole other opinion on that. But for you to introduce that in season 1, then we're going to get deeper into the Ajas and the more political aspects. And I think because we have dove pretty deep into the Red Aja already in season 1, I do feel that that will kind of come to play. Or we're going to see more of that play out in season 2. Is my thought.
Do you think, like, I've heard some people suggest that they might merge Elida and Leandrin, or do you think maybe do you still see the that arc where Leandrin takes the Supergirls to Falme?
Yeah.
Do you still see that as a likely occurrence, or do you think they're going to change that up somehow?
The fact that I think Leandrin has a interest in Nynaeve, where she's come up to her several times or had a conversation with her and tried to kind of plant those seeds. I do see their world still colliding in that way. Yeah. And having that, I don't know. I don't think they're going to merge Elida. I think she will be introduced as her own in season 2.
They introduced her, in my opinion. When Moraine said an older Aes Sedai beat her to help her, right. I thought that was Elida she was talking about. That's a good point. Swain or literally anyone, but I like to think that was Elida.
That's a good point. I think I did see somebody say that too, or mention that. That's a good point.
And they introduced some sort of maybe romantic past between Moraine and Leandrin, which I also found interesting. And so they seem to be the same age. I don't know if the ages align as they do in the books. I think Elida isn't she more or less the same age as Moraine?
Lida's 2 years older.
Yeah, she's older.
Oh yeah.
Elida became Aes Sedai a couple years before.
Okay, yeah, that's right.
But Leandrin became Aes Sedai 10 years later.
Yeah, so she's younger.
She's younger. So they actually maybe aged her up a little bit.
Possibly.
Or tell from their look,
Right. Something about agelessness. I don't know. Yeah, good point.
Yeah. Right.
I hope. I mean,
I know. She's one of my favorites too. It's weird, but I like her.
Yeah. Well, if you bring in, so you have Leandrin, who's obviously an intense person. She's an intense red. Nynaeve already has trust issues with her, but she knows her.
Right.
And they've established that. So now you bring the girls back to the tower. They don't have any friends. Maybe even not Swan. It's possible Swan will get deposed a little earlier. There have been rumors that Sophie Okonedo, the actress who plays Swan, might not be in the show much anymore. So it's possible that she'll get killed off.
Shut up.
I know that would be sad, but that's the rumor. So there's a lot of things they could do there where they bring Elida in sooner. It seemed like in season 1, it almost felt like Leandrin was playing for the Amerlin seat a little bit.
That's kind of what I was thinking, or they were setting a little bit of that up already.
Yeah.
It would make sense. Rafe mentioned that in an interview after the season finished, that basically nobody's safe anymore. He said Loyal didn't die, but nobody is safe. And it makes sense. Like you can't carry a cast of 60 season regulars. Like you just can't.
in that opening scene with Leandrin, when they show her ring, it starts red, but it kind of falls into the shadows and goes dark.
No way. I did not catch that.
And I guarantee you that was on purpose. It's a very dark red. I wouldn't say it's totally black, but it definitely goes from red to
Okay,
dark
I'm gonna
red
go back
or
and
black.
watch that again.
And I think that was a very subtle hint, but for some of us book readers, like, oh yeah,
we know.
she's black. So I think that's going to be one of the big Aja reveals of season 2 is the black.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's where they're going with it. And she's so, I mean, Kate brings such a level to her character that I never thought anybody could, that it's almost one of those scenarios that does happen when you make an adaptation and an actor kind of just draws out a character or develops a character arc that you didn't really anticipate, but because it's just so strong and it becomes so popular, you really have to build a bigger storyline around it. And I think she's going to be one of the ones that will be, I mean, like in the Walking Dead, it was Norman Reedus's character, who's not even really in the graphic novels, but he was so extremely iconic and, you know, such a touchstone for how things went in that narrative that he's obviously still in the seasons. So I think Leandrin is going to be the same, because that actress has done something with her that in the writer's room is exciting, because then you get to have this opportunity to go in a bit of a little different direction. But to answer your original question, I do think that I think she, because again, we've seen her already talking to Nynaeve and kind of digging her claws in, I do feel like that's probably what's going to happen in season 2 with her.
This has been an amazing discussion. Do you have any final thoughts before we close off?
Final thoughts.
I'll just say, you know, after watching episode 1, I had my concerns. Then I watched episode 2. Some of those concerns went away. Then I watched episode 3. Some of those concerns went away. New concerns were introduced, and so on, right? Yeah. By the time the finale came out, I was like, okay, there are some things I don't understand. There are some directions they took I don't even like. But I've learned to trust Rafe and this team and this process. There's so many things that go into making a show. And Kristy, I'm sure you know this way better than I do.
Yeah.
So many cooks in the kitchen, so many people giving input, so many ideas being thrown at the wall. And to even have a coherent story at the end of all of this and managing to make an intriguing, first season that leaves even book readers with questions really is very impressive to me. And so I think what I would say is, despite the fact that some of these episodes have their issues or there are parts of them that don't match the books the way we might want, I think we need to trust the process. I really do think they have an end goal in mind. And I think there are things that they have to take into account, like casting. They can't have someone like Sophie Okonedo to show up for one episode for the next 10 years. There are little things like that they have to account for. And then to throw COVID into that mix and to throw a major cast member leaving before they finished season 1. Like, I can't even imagine some of the hurdles they had to go through to get that finale done. And I think we need to just sit back and go, okay, they have a master plan. Hopefully some of these concerns we have will get resolved over time. Just like the concerns I had from the pilot, by the end of the first season, most of them were resolved. And so I guess that's kind of my final thoughts is, yes, changes, whether you like them or not, we want to get to the end, right? That's our end goal, is to get there, to get to the end of the books. And I think this is a great start overall.
I'm kind of a little bit on the same page, where I feel like, you know, watching the pilot episode, you're concerned about a few things. And then as the process goes on, things are solved, but new kind of concerns are introduced. That's a great way to put it. I feel that season 1 was the season of establishing story and adding some elements of kind of doing some world building, giving some of those foundational kind of pillars. But I feel like what really is going to elevate the show, and I think that will really help the show, and I hope it's a focus for season 2, is bigger character development. Now that we've introduced these characters, we've introduced their world, and we've introduced their internal and external conflicts, it's time for us to really dig in and start to love these characters, attach ourselves to them, and care about their journey. So that would be my thought for season 2 is, We've done a lot of establishment in season 1, regardless of whether we like book changes or not. And we didn't like this and we don't understand that, but we liked this. Really, it was, we've established the world and we understand who's in it and what's going on. So now season 2 is the opportunity to really say, we want the audience to now fall in love with these people so that we're going on the journey with them and that we feel the same heartache and pain and joy that they do.
Yes. Well said. I hope that's what they do.
Yeah, for sure. Because I like Show Rand, to be honest with you. I know he's not everybody's favorite. Definitely in the books, he's not everybody's favorite, but I like Show Rand. And I'm Team Rand for the show right now. So I really want more for him.
Well, and they do have an opportunity to set up some really interesting things. We still don't really know that there are differences between the male and female half other than the corruption, right?
Yes.
From the show specifically, there's all kinds of trivia and behind the scenes stuff that explains some of that. But
sure,
from just the show, there's so much to explore. And I can't wait to see that as Rand takes this journey to find himself.
And
really, that's what he does for the first 3 books. He's running away from who he is. And
right.
He finally comes to the point where he has to embrace it. I feel like season 2 is the opportunity to really
do that. Yeah.
And then you have Matt, who I don't think they anticipated that they would be leaving Matt in Tar Valon originally, but there he is. Mm-hmm. What a great way to introduce book 3 Matt, where he meets Tom in a tavern and has all this luck and like they could really explore that. And I'm looking forward to that sort of a thing. So pairing with the wolves, I mean, if he's going to be running after the horn, which is very likely, maybe they'll introduce an Elias or Huron type character and give him more in-depth character development. Those are the things that I think you're absolutely right. They have to do that stuff in season 2.
Yeah.
To make us just fall in love with these people. To be fair, I've already fallen in love with Nynaeve and Egwene from the show. It's the 3 young men that are the least focused on in the show so far, I feel.
Yeah, they definitely deserve their time to shine for sure. But Rand overall, obviously, because now there is no question. We don't have the kind of question of who's the Dragon Reborn. The audience doesn't need to figure that out now. So what the audience needs to do is understand his journey, his arc, his struggle, and then go on that journey with him and care about him so that we do see him make it to the end.
Yeah.
And also gives everybody else the opportunity to now start growing in their own directions.
Sure. Right.
It's interesting. I hear a lot of people complaining about how this person's different and that person's different. But to me, when I look at the characters on screen, I see the characters in the books. Like I see them in slightly different circumstances than we've seen in the books, but ultimately their personality is the same.
Yeah.
And the actors have done an amazing job, absolutely phenomenal job in bringing the characters from the page to the screen.
Yeah, I do think so. I think there's character quirks and things that we notice as the book readers that we talked about it earlier, kind of at the beginning, where there's things that we see like, oh no, that's Moraine. Other audience people may be like, why doesn't she say anything? And we're like, that's not how Moraine works. Like we get that, right? So they really have done a good job of kind of bringing those elements to screen.
Agreed.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, it was fun.
This was my pleasure. I hope this was as much fun for you as it was for me.
Yeah. Let's do it again.
I could talk Wheel of Time all day,
all the time.
If that wasn't obvious from my ranting all night. So thank you for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for watching. Before you go, please remember to like, subscribe, and share this with your friends. This has been MALKIER'S Kings, What Were They Thinking? In partnership with Dragonmount. Join us next time as we do a crap analysis of episode 2 with Ebony from Dragonmount, Rebecca from Reading the Pattern, and Child Bornhold from Twitter of Time. This is MALKIER'S King signing off.
And that's our show. Thank you so much for watching. And as always, please subscribe, hit the like button, give us a thumbs up, or leave us a comment. We love comments, especially positive ones. And if you have any friends that are interested in the Wheel of Time, please share some of our videos with them. And as always, a huge thank you to our sponsor, Tor Books, as well as our amazing Patreon community. And if you are interested in learning about how more of this show is made or some Wheel of Time insights, you too can become a member of the Patreon community. And as always, follow us on Dragonmount with social media And thank you so much for watching.